the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out on me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for
Check
you
for me, Phil.
You're troweling out.
Face little pimp stick.
Check.
There you go.
Good time for you guys.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep. Hey, look at that. That's a full-on check.
Hey.
That is the lovely dulcet tones of Philip Ittner checking from downtown Kiev in with Johnny Million, of course, joining us. This is the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. And so Philip, give us the current state of where you are right now as a human being, because the chat always worries and I always worry because we have all become your mother.
Well, we're okay. We're having power outages.
Mm-hmm.
We have these power outages all throughout the kind of center, all throughout Kiev.
Right.
But they kind of are spotty depending on what substation you're connected to.
Okay.
So right now I could have all my lights on right now, but what I'm doing is running my circle ring light off of a power bank, as well as the phone that I'm connected to you on, because I don't want to put any extra strain on the substation.
On the grid.
I could have my lights on. I could, yeah, exactly. So, but we're all trying to use as little electricity as possible because we don't want to put a strain on things. Although the electricians, the civil engineers are doing an excellent job. I mean, a really top-notch,
right?
Unsung heroes of this conflict. At the end, when the story of this war is told, they will be the ones that don't get the credit that they really deserve, because it's not as exciting as the frontline stuff. But they are out there working nonstop. They have provisions. They have anticipated things that might blow because of the another section might be exerted too hard, and so that will then blow another substation, and that'll go without power. So they're having to be very maneuverable and able to adapt at a moment's notice, and they are preparing for it. Now, also keeping in mind that Ukraine's entire power grid is set up for this. It's set up because of the heavy winter. It's actually kind of a common thing to happen here, where something will pop, and others. But the problem is, because it's so widespread, that they're now having to. It's like if all the cracks in the dam broke at once. Sure. You can stop one in a normal year. You can stop a crack and deal with that down the road while the rest of the dam holds. But because the entire dam has got just so many cracks in it, that they're running around trying to just stick so many different plugs and different cracks, that they're overwhelmed, and that's what's happening.
I'm not saying a word.
I know. There's tons of double entendres there.
Yes, there is. I'm in double entendre hell right now. But I'm just saying, if we could do something if we could plug Johnny Million's damn crack sometimes, his cat could get some sleep. All right, so thank you. Yes. So never.
Exactly. But we're look. It's the snows have started. Winter is upon us. Kiev is beautiful, blanketed in a lovely white blanket of snow, and it's nice and pretty, but it's cold, and this is gonna be difficult. This is going to be very, very difficult. But there is absolutely no lack of endurance from the people here. I mean, I was yesterday. I was in a store, and the lights went out, and we were all all lined up. Everybody had their goods. They were ready to check out, and the lights went boom out. And one woman kind of got angry about it. She was frustrated. She was like, there's so many people that are doing generators around the city so that in this, because we all know this is going to happen. Why
Right.
doesn't this store have a generator that's ready to kick in?
Right.
And everybody else in the line, not meanly, nobody was like, get out of here, you.
Like, hey,
It was
hey.
more like, yeah, everybody was like, look, this is, look, we're all dealing with this.
Yeah.
So they didn't have the money for a generator. Maybe they didn't have the generator hooked up correctly. Maybe the generator's at another branch of the store.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Let's just all try and get through this. And she grumbled a bit, and she wasn't happy. She was clearly unhappy.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, she was like, okay, yeah, all right. That's kind of how I see the general attitude in the city right now.
Right. Obviously, there's a whole lot of stuff going on, not the least of which is the explosion in the St. Petersburg pipeline that happened today, last night, whatever. Oh, my God, it's gigantic.
The footage of that is crazy. And there's a lot going on. There's an awful lot going on, as is usual for
right.
Place.
Well, that's what I was. The usual part of it was what really stuck out to me, because I was saying to my girlfriend this morning, I was like, this is in Russia. This is happening with some serious regularity.
Mm-hmm.
Giant power stations, because I remember there was a chemical plant, I believe it was in Texas, that exploded maybe about 15 years ago. And it dusted the town with chemicals, and it was a big story about how it was poorly maintained and big investigation, changed a lot of the regulations of what's okay and what's not. And then I think like there was a transformer that went out and like near the TYT studios in Culver City, and they blamed it on Democrats who run LA, which is hilarious. But like these are relatively small on the scale of as bad as the Texas explosion was, and as certainly annoying as the power going out because of a transformer blows is. It's not even on the scale of the fact that, like, you imagine a nuclear size explosion, because this was huge. I mean, it looks like a Moab explosion going off in your town, and then about 6 weeks later, another one doing it. Or Moscow. There's been like 4 of them.
And you got to understand the importance of Petersburg. So the structure of Russia, and I don't want to bang on about this too much because, this is pretty common knowledge, but Russia is not, despite its enormous size, there's really only a small part of it, percentage-wise, that is populated. And only a small percentage of that is populated by any city of any particular importance. And really, when it boils right down to it, it's Moscow and St. Petersburg, with the Ekaterinburg on the outlier and Sochi and a couple of other cities around but it's really St. Petersburg and Moscow. So to have this massive explosion, I'm trying to think if there would be I guess it would be New York and LA. Like if there was an explosion in Orange County or in the Valley, not even Orange County, right? Like in the Valley.
Yes.
If suddenly like as you say, Culver City, but not just a little like an explosion, like a proper mushroom cloud explosion. A lot of people would be like, "What is going on? Something is very wrong here."
Right.
It's not only the fact that it blew up. It's not only the fact that it was so massive. It's the fact that it happened right on the border of the second city of Russia. It really is. So, it's not only a blast that affected their refining capabilities. It's not their energy sector. It's also the mental effect that's going to have on the people of Russia. This stuff is not supposed to happen. Right. And they're getting bashed time and it's repeatedly getting bashed with this idea the war is not going well.
Right. But also on their own soil by their own problems. Because again, this doesn't look like a soft strike. It could be, but it looks more like just, they have abandoned sections of infrastructure that need people, running them because they need those men on the front line. So they just scooped guys up and they're like, I'm the temperature checker at 5 points along a this section of pipeline. That's my day job. And you're going to pull me from that and send me to try and take, a chunk of the Dnipro. Like, get out of here. So, and by the way, yesterday, day before yesterday, Russia issued its largest single day debt, like cash infusion, money printer go burr moment for the ruble in its history. And did it specifically to increase military spending, which, in a real world would devalue your currency immeasurably because it's doubling what you've done. It is effectively a version of cutting your interest rate while they've been raising interest rates, but then printing the money anyways, which is really nuts. And that they're going to, the spending for 2023 on the military is going to be double what it was last year in 2021 leading up to this. So anybody who thinks it's time to talk to Russia and that they're going to be a fair partner in this is insane, because if they spent that much money leading into a war they thought they were going to win, and they're like, we would like to talk for a little while and just simmer things down and go back to where we were so that we can spend double what we're spending on the military for the next shot. Yeah, I mean, it's madness. It is.
Yeah, it's madness. It's also madness for us to think, because the Ukrainians know the Russians better than anybody on the planet.
Right.
We do not study we study dozens of different potential adversaries across the globe. The Ukrainians know that their primary they have one, right, and they were tied at the hip to them for centuries. So they know their enemy very well. I saw this thing yesterday about Poroshenko, apparently. So the previous president of Ukraine, during the 2014 period, 2014, when the invasion happened into the Donbass and Crimea was seized, they started, despite the Minsk agreement, the Ukrainians started building up their military. And there was a guy who was a Putin apologist, and he came out with this argument that, well, see, the Ukrainians were always like belligerent. They were expecting war. They were building up their military industrial complex. And my response was, well, yeah, of course, because they knew that the Russians were not going to stop with the Donbass. This was that they always knew from 2014 on until today. They always knew that the Russians were never going to just let them go. This is the most important colony that the Russian Empire ever had, the Soviet Empire ever had, and they are not
it's their
just
window.
going to say, oh, well, okay.
And
think how hard it was. Think how hard it was for the British Empire to let go of Ireland, or for the French Empire to let go of, say, Algeria. And those were relatively, and I know I could get in trouble for this, but those were comparatively benevolent empires when it came to the way they kind of controlled. Somebody from India or Ireland, or Algeria or Morocco might take umbrage with that.
Sure.
But compared to what the Russians do, there's no comparison. Sure. I mean, they slaughter entire populations. There's a story a guy told me about when he was learning a Ukrainian musical instrument about because it gave identity to Ukrainians that was separate from the Russians. They gathered them all together in Kharkiv in the 1930s and said, we're going to have a concert of Ukrainian traditional music. They gathered them all together in a music hall and slaughtered them. Now the Irish and then the Brits and the French did a whole bunch of nasty stuff during their period of empire, but I can't ever recall anything like that happening. So the Ukrainians knew who the Russians were, and they knew that they would eventually be coming here. And so they have been preparing for it for years. And for us to now say, just make peace, we'll figure out the details of it later, and just, we'll make some sort of special agreement with Donbass. The Ukrainians are going, no, you don't understand. Yeah. If we do not decisively beat the Russians, they will come back. They will keep coming back unless we send them packing.
We have to take a break. We're a little bit over that part, but I want to discuss a little bit of that because it seems that the cries for make peace with Russia, the Skeksis of the interwebs that are calling for make peace, all those folks seem to raise their voices when Russia gets hit the worst. When Russia's on its heels, then it's time to just let's call it off. They're on their heels. They haven't left yet. They let them keep some of what they had, that's enough. If they're on their heels, instead of letting it continue until they break, the Ukrainians have to break on their behalf. It's so striking. We'll be back right after this.
Yeah.
I know I'm only on one day a week. I get it. I'm going to have to jump on GarageBand and start sawing something together. This is the House Bar Show. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the House Bar Show. And a guitar note, and then progressive, and all. Yeah, it's going to be good.
The Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It is. It's totally going to be good. Philip Ittner is still with us, and we got carried away, so this next segment is kind of a short one, but we were talking during the break that and before that about how it seems like let's do peace talks, immediately peace talks. We got to get peace talks. It really comes up anytime it's clear that the Ukrainians are making progress and the Russians are starting to get their butt kicked in a serious way. It happened when Kharkiv was taken back. And anytime when it happened right after the Russians were driven out of Kiev, or driven back from Kiev, and it's happening now that they took Kherson. They took everything east of or west of the Dnipro River and more. And now that that's happening, oh my God, Christina Vanden Heuvel, does this article like now is the time. If there's ever been a time, it's now. No, actually, if it looks
Milley,
like
General Milley,
right,
also indicated that.
Right. Well, also here's the thing: the military guys, I think, have a reason to overtly call for peace talks, and we'll talk now. We'll talk. Let's come to the table. It won't be on your terms because you're on the back foot. That would be Milley's reasoning. And yet on the in reality, we're still giving them the arms that they need, and we're still continuing to support them. And NATO just upped their what the European countries, not technically NATO countries that are just EU countries, whatever, are giving more stuff as well. And we also the U.S. did a $20 million grain for Ukraine payment this week as well to help the growth and shipment of grain out of there to protect, hunger in the third world that would directly be the cause of this. So anyways, catch us up too on the world according to Ittner that's going on, around there. Yeah.
Well, there's just to finish just briefly with the last couple of points about that, and then we will move on because you can bang on about this for a long time. But there's two things about it. One, there's a comparison that's being made by an awful lot of people about like how World War II came about because we did not march into Berlin at the end of World War I. So the Germans didn't feel the effect of actually really being defeated. So they're like, we weren't defeated, we were betrayed. Right. They never had the decisive defeat that the population needed to see so that they didn't come back and have grievances and try it again. And then there's the other thing about it, which is I think a lot of people who are very, and there are lots of people who are very, they're very knowledgeable about Russia. And I think they recognize as many of us do, and myself included, is that I don't think this is the crisis. I don't think this war is the crisis. The war is already done. The war, in many ways, is already done. It's just a matter of time. Russia's going to lose this war. Yeah. But the real question is, and the folks who watch and learn about Russia deeply, is that what happens after? This is going to be a fundamental crisis for Russia. This will shake them to their very core about who they are, about what their identity is. They are no longer going to see themselves through the prism of empire because they will not have empire anymore. This war is not the crisis. This war is bad. This war is difficult and it's horrific. But the real crisis is going to come when a federation of countries that has been bound together under the dominance of Moscow, many of whom have nuclear weapons on their territory, now have to reassess who they are and who their sense of identity is. And the possible fragmentation of the Russian Federation is going to be a really risky, dangerous period.
Agreed.
So this is bad. But when Russia loses this war, which it inevitably will do, the crisis will be, what does that mean for the Russian Federation?
Right.
And I think a lot of people recognize that, and they're scared of it. So they're like, just let's figure out a peace that everybody can agree to, and we'll go back to some sort of like marginal status quo. Well, I argue that that's not possible. My perspective is, this is a long time coming. The Russian Empire expanded way too quickly. It is way too unwieldy. It's much larger than it can be managed.
Right.
And moving forward into the 21st century, they're going to have to reassess who they are, not only in their sense of identity, but also just structurally. It doesn't function. The country only functions because all the power is under the thumb of Moscow. So this is just getting started. And as much as people would love to let's go back to something else, it's just not going to happen. We're forging a new future. Sorry.
Well,
go ahead.
No, that's okay. Even if they got a piece of Ukraine, it would be the only healthy part of their entire country, and they still got all the elements of economic collapse that they've been building forever underneath all this stuff that's not going anywhere. And their relationship with China, which they were like, we have a friendship without limits. Remember that earlier this spring? Well, it's got a lot of limits. And apparently it wasn't just the Turkish ambassador or the Turkish prime minister that castigated Putin. So did Xi on one of their phone calls. So recently, this is not going well for them, because what it is the Ukraine war, their invasion of Ukraine, makes it harder for China to justify Taiwan, because it brings people's attention to sovereign countries that aren't technically run on top of, because, and it's a little different because Ukraine used to be part of the USSR. Taiwan has never been under the CCP. The Chinese Communist Party of China only runs mainland China. It eventually took over and reclaimed Hong Kong, but it still technically doesn't run that place. It's just been muddier because that's who the agreement was with. But Taiwan was always a separate country, just ethnically under the envelope of China in terms of how the rest of the world saw it, back when China was impoverished and burnt down, essentially. And Russia is going back to that kind of time where Ukraine is its Taiwan, in that it's wholly independent now. It doesn't need it at all. And it is more advanced and will continue to advance beyond the level that the country is capable of, while Russia and China collapse in on each other. That's a gnarly aspect. Kazakhstan and all these other countries that want to be a little more like the Saudis, they want to be rich oil and gas crowds, But
it also is going to call into question their sense of identity, because Russians' sense of identity is very much tied into the sense of Russia as an empire. And so for the first time in centuries, that's going to disappear. And just like the Brits had to reassess who they are on the global stage in the post-imperial period, the Russians are going to have to do the same thing. And I am concerned that they will not handle it even remotely as well as the Brits or the French did.
Well, the interesting thing is, what are they going to...
This is just getting started.
Right. The interesting thing is, what are they going to do with it? What are they going to, it doesn't matter at a certain point. If you don't have the means and wherewithal to push back, all you got to do is grumble and hate. And they could still cause trouble. They could be a troll farm. They could cyber attack the world into a seizure if they wanted to, even if they don't end up building their military back. And that might be their fallback. That might be the only fallback, is that they become a rogue cyber state that is just hell-bent on destroying the SWIFT system and everything else, so that, hospitals in the West shut down. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the Housemarks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Johnny Million is farming questions in our chat for Philip. We'll answer them on the other side.
Yes, please.
They're all very sexy.
Oh, look out.
Yay.
You're listening to Housemarks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more.
Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
So, currently, and we'll go over some of this too, Philip, as we go forward. But currently, the only target Russia seems to have inside Ukraine, oddly enough, it's not Crimea, it's not the Dnipro, it's not pushing back into Kharkiv, it's not even getting the Belarusians to come into Kiev again. It's Bakhmut, right dead center.
Yeah.
And this is the meat grinder of the whole thing. The claimed and unclaimed and reclaimed territory, map of that looks like cuts of meat on a cow. It's these little circles that get taken and it's horrifying because in 3 of the battles that I've been researching and looking at, the Russians lost 800 guys in one. The Ukrainians lost nobody in these. I would like to remind you. They don't. I mean, they're using artillery to protect. 600 in another battle, and at least 200 crossing a river. That's
I was at a function last night, a kind of a cocktail party kind of thing with a bunch of different. These are conflict zones always get a little bit weird. So they're like NGOs, and then there were guys from diplomatic
all those pictures of World War II where they get around a piano and start singing patriotic songs and drinking, whatever the local beverage.
It's Casablanca with this mishmash of guys that all have their fingers in one pie or another.
Right.
Anyhow, I struck up a conversation with a guy who just came back from Bakhmut, and he said the thing that really struck him about Bakhmut was the fact that the Russians they came running across an open field. They were just running at the Ukrainian positions, and the Ukrainians didn't have to do anything. All they had to do was just fire artillery. They were running across open fields, running at Ukrainian positions, and the Ukrainians just went, "Well, okay, if that's how you want to die, then we'll kill you." Right. And they did. I mean, it's the guy who I spoke to, who was an Australian security officer. And he said he'd never seen anything like it in his life. He was like the futility of running in open fields when artillery was raining down on them was just, he couldn't believe it. And so they sent it is in a lot of ways. It's like suicide by cop. It's just this willingness to just throw yourself into the meat grinder. And again, somebody else at the event was involved with the conversation. He said, "Yeah, they're just cannon fodder." And I said, "Well, actually, in Russian, the saying is cannon meat," which I think kind of tells you the difference between there's cannon fodder, and then the Russian translation is literally cannon meat. Their only military doctrine is we have a lot of artillery. We have a lot of soldiers. And the fact that they don't even have air supremacy right now, that there are still Ukrainian helicopters and bomber jets flying right now is astounding to me. The first thing that any NATO nation does when they enter into a conflict is try to control the skies, because it's such an overwhelming asset.
And remember the big conversation. Conversation at the beginning was NATO needs to help us control the skies. NATO, and there was a big thing about we're not going to set our planes in there because we're not going to put them up against Russians and trigger World War III and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, the irony is we didn't have to. Russia turned out to be so terrible at this that they gave away air dominance. I mean, there's no other way to really describe it. It was their battle to lose. Let's answer some of the questions that Johnny has for you too.
But you're very right. You're very right. Bakhmut is turning out to be an essential battle, and we'll see how it shakes down. But I think the Ukrainians are, because they just keep throwing it at Bakhmut and they keep getting repulsed. So anyhow, questions, Johnny?
So what is the mood in Kiev and Ukraine? This is from Eric. What's the mood in Kiev and Ukraine now that train service has been reopened between Kiev and Kherson?
The fact that train service is restored to Kherson is amazing. It is such a morale boost. Pardon me. It is I don't know if you saw the video of it, of the first train from Kiev to Kherson coming into the Kherson station, and people were openly weeping.
Yeah.
They had gathered together at a train station, like those old 1930s kind of newsreels that you saw.
Yeah.
And it was, people weeping because it was this reestablishment of their connection to the rest of Ukraine. It's been a massive morale boost. The fact that electricity has been restored to the Kherson railway station in order to facilitate those trains coming back, that's also a major boost. But yeah, no, morale is high, but with the understanding that we are still facing a very tough period ahead of us. So it's a mixed bag, but generally morale is high.
On a related note, by the way, to trains, the Chinese high-speed rail into Shanghai, a huge section of train and the transformers that power the whole thing, which are not like the little ones on the end of your block, but are gigantic, exploded. And nobody was killed because nobody was in the train, allegedly, according to the Chinese government, which the rest of the train was packed. But for some reason, the two cars that blew up had no one in them, which I totally believe. And the transformer itself was sending out so much electricity because it ran the whole maglev run of this train that it looked like something out of a Godzilla movie. It was shocking the sky. So anyways, good train news, bad train news.
One last quick thing about the train system, the railway system within Ukraine. I've seen a lot of people saying, again, those who are rooting for a Russian victory here saying, aha, you see, the railway system is reliant on electricity, and if the electrical grid goes down, they won't be able to move their trains around, and they won't be able to move, people or munitions. Well, yes and no, that's true, but the Ukrainians are well aware of that, and they are bringing out of mothball, and this is really kind of interesting, like everything, coal-powered railway trains, even steam trains are being rehabilitated. It's not like the Ukrainians aren't anticipating this. So even if the electrical grid does go down and it does affect the electrical railway system, they are preparing for that, and there are contingency plans. It will not be perfect. It will not be a 1-to-1 ratio replacement, but it's not like they aren't preparing for that. So, the electrical system going down is not going to stop rail in this country.
Excellent. Okay, next question, real quick.
From Nacho Tube, do they have tacos in Ukraine?
Oh,
yeah, they do. They're not nearly as good, but yeah, they do. Sure, they do.
All right.
It's like Midwestern sushi.
Yeah,
it's like sushi in a Midwestern restaurant. It's you take what you can get. I
got a buddy of mine who runs a Mexican restaurant in San Francisco. I keep trying to tell him, when the war is over, come on over here and we'll branch out.
Yeah.
All right, so from
got,
Jennifer Kosham in the chat, what can ordinary American mortals do to help? Is there a particular charity aimed at keeping Babusi warm?
There's tons of stuff out there. Try and find a reputable one. Go to a Ukrainian-based charity group. It's not hard to find, but do try and make sure that it's connected to a Ukrainian organization on the ground here. International groups are reputable, Red Cross and all the rest of it, but try and find somebody that is on the ground here doing something. And no one's, it's terrible that I don't have this just on a cheat sheet. I should, but it's not hard to find. Just do it. You'll do it very, very quickly. You'll find something. There are aid groups. Go to the International Legion.
I have a recurring thing that shows up in my chat that I put in there through the like Restream and Tweet, like all these different streaming services I use are all trying to help. So they give you the option to try and tweet stuff out. And there's a link that will pop up. It comes up very regularly in my chat, especially on, on Twitch, but you should also see it on YouTube, that gives you a link that you can go to that helps you parse out how you can help. So yeah, that regularly goes through my live stream chat here and during the weekly show. So in case you want to know, Okay, let's grab one. Let's grab one more. We got a minute
before our break.
Yeah. Yep.
So Ed's 3D Tech. This is kind of a biggie. Can you ask Philip if the loss of soldiers is higher than we think?
On the Ukrainian side, on both sides, I would say that it is not. I would say that it's even worse on the Russian side than we know, but it's bad on the Russian side. I would say the Ukrainians are definitely understating their losses for sure. It's not as publicly known, but I would suspect highly that the Ukrainians have lost a lot more soldiers than they're letting on. However, having said that, the Ukrainians have a deeper sense of resilience to, as horrible as it is to take casualties. They know this is an existential threat, so they are willing is the wrong word. They can sustain a percentage larger than the Russians can. But the Russians are taking dozens and dozens of thousands, hundreds of, over 100,000, no doubt in my mind, have been killed or wounded in this war on the Russian side. On the Ukrainian side, I would bet you it's in the high tens, 60 to 80, maybe. I don't know. That's a guess off the top of my head, because again, the Ukrainians are being so restrictive in that. But again, but they know that this is it. This is everything for them, so they can, as horrible as it is, sustain more casualties than the Russians can. Except the Russians care less.
Let's take a break, and then we'll come back after this, and then we'll have a few more minutes with Philip Ittner. You're listening to the House Sparks Radio program.
And I will get you an A group.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, we'll have one on the other side. We'll be back right after this.